My name is Teresa Barito, and Jonathan Luna and I were first cousins. He was a bright light. He was one of the most special people that I've ever known. I did not see him often, but whenever I did see him, it was always a good reunion. He was very positive, just a dynamic person.
Describe him. Smart.
Just smart, all about family. He really liked to keep in touch with family. He came down to visit my parents early in 2001. Just popped up to see them. He would go see my sisters, and he stayed in touch with family members. At his funeral, someone mentioned the Luna effect. And I thought that was very accurate for him. He did have a way with people. I can't recall anybody ever saying anything negative about him. Nobody was ever disappointed in him, ashamed of anything that he was doing. We were just proud of him. My youngest sister, her husband's father, died in August of 2001, and they were in the area for the funeral, and I had invited them over to dinner. It was a Saturday, and just before they came, she called to tell me that Joey was in town and he had his son with him, and she wanted to know if they could bring him for dinner, so I said sure. We were in the living room. I think we had had dinner by that time, and we were just sitting there talking, and out of the blue he said, "I hate my job."
This is Jonathan.
Yes, he said, "I hate my job." And at the time, I didn't know where he was working. I thought he was with a corporate office somewhere, doing some really dull work that wasn't challenging. But it certainly stood out because I'm sure in the time that they were there, we talked about a lot of things. But I remember that specifically. And it always comes back to me now, even though I didn't know where he was at the time. It was just the fact that he was unhappy, that he was at a point in his life where he was unhappy and dissatisfied, and it bothered him enough that he would just come out and say it.
And this was, you said, about August 2001.
Yes. He was sitting on my right on the sofa. And, when he said it, it impressed me. I mean, it wasn't something that I would just shrug off. See, I don't remember what he said to encourage my brother-in-law at that time, and I don't remember. I know we talked about the dinner that I made, and we talked about some other things, but the only thing that I really remember him saying to me was that he hated his job, and it sounded like he was having a moment where he just had to confide this. He said that to the three of us, but it did seem to come just from, out of the blue. I can't recall us talking about our jobs.
Well, did he seem down when he said that, or?
I felt that way. I mean, even now, my emotional response is the same. I felt bad for him. I felt the discouragement at the time. I felt that I thought he was stressed. He was probably under stress, and I don't know if I should say depressed because I don't really know how deeply it was bothering him. But I know that when he said it, it's been the one thing that he said to me that I have not forgotten. And my impression at that time was that he was unhappy, that he was just in a situation that he wanted to be out of. But it sounded as if, well, I hate it, but I'm in it. He didn't say I'm going to get out of it. He just said he hated it.
It's almost like he's trapped or something.
Yeah. We had a good time for the time that we were together. He had his son with him. His son was very quiet, and shy. So I think that it seemed to me that he was looking for some relief by taking the trip. It could have just been a trip that he just made he didn't really plan it, but he just up and did it kind of like on impulse. I mean, we didn't know he was coming. It was just him and his son. And they were just kind of like on the road. Yeah, he was sitting, I still see him, he was sitting on my right, and he probably had his son in his lap. And he said, I hate my job.
Did you realize he was, and you said you didn't realize he was working for the Justice Department?
No,
then?
I didn't realize that. Now looking back and reading some things from the book, I realize now that, he was in that situation. Because I hadn't seen him in a while, I didn't know. I think the last I had heard, he was with that other office. So I didn't realize he was a prosecutor at that time. And see, he didn't talk about that. He was just visiting, and but I think now looking back that it must have been weighing heavily on him, for him to make that statement, especially since it wasn't as if any of us talked a lot, so we weren't in the habit of talking to each other and sharing things. And that just came out of him,
So you were saying the last time you saw him was your mother's funeral a few months before Jonathan's death.
Yes. That was July of 2003. And he was already at my parents' house when I got there. And as soon as I walked in, he had his baby son. He had his youngest son in his arms. And that's the first thing he did was hand me the baby, And then he took pictures. He wanted to take pictures of family members because a lot of our family on our parents' side were there. A lot of the uncles and aunts, and that was what he was doing. The picture kept growing because it started with maybe 5 or 6 brothers and sisters, and then they would send for another one who was outside, or maybe another one was in another part of the house or whatever. So through it all, he was there taking pictures of the family. So I was taking a picture of my aunt, and I happened to have gotten a picture of him in the background back there in the driveway. And that's my Aunt Emma, who is married to my Uncle John.
And there in the background?
There, yeah. I guess I was taking that picture of Aunt Emma, but there in the background back there is Joey. And I'm sure, I don't know who he was talking to. That might have been their van. I'm sure he was carrying a lot with him at that point, but he wasn't revealing anything.
So he seemed fine.
What?
He didn't seem... Did you ever know him to be a depressive or depressed? Or?
No, I didn't. He was always very up. When we met him, we met Jonathan and Angela at an anniversary party for my uncle and aunt. And that was the first time I met Angela. She was a sweet young lady. His father was with him, and we had a lot of fun at the table. I remember that. That's
you
me and
Jonathan's...
Uncle Paul. Yeah, that was before we left to go to the.
So that's Jonathan's dad.
That's his father. Yeah, they. He always took his father around. His father. I remember Joey and his father teasing me and my sister, because we were teasing each other. So we had fun. And then prior to that, I saw him at a family reunion in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And see, that's what I'm saying. Family was important to him. He had made a point of coming and bringing his father. He has had a lot of energy, very positive aura. I didn't realize he ran. I didn't realize that he was, really into running and taking care of himself. But he definitely always seemed on top of it, and bright and focused.
The point is, when he tells you in 2001, I really hate my job, and he seemed down, that was unusual for him.
I think so. See, that's why it stands out. It stood out, even though I just figured, okay, he's in some dull corporate office. It stood out because it wasn't like him to be negative about anything. And this was a job, and of course, when you think about a job, and you think about your livelihood, and you're saying, I hate it. Well, I took that very seriously. I know what that means for me when I hate a job. I hate it. I wish I weren't here. I'm stuck here, but I really am trying to I will find a way to get away. And I remember thinking that for him in the back of my mind that, well, I hope he gets out of that. I hope he's able to, and I expected that he would. We all loved him, and you didn't have to be with him. For me, even though there weren't that many occasions when we were together, when we were, that was my cousin. And it had so much to do with him reaching out. He made a point of being with family. Like I said, he came down from Richmond that time, to see my parents and, to hopefully see me or my sister. And it just so it just so happened that my youngest sister, who lives in Northern Virginia, just was there. Unfortunately, it was a sad occasion, but she was there. So when she called and said, Joey's here with his son, can we bring him over for dinner? Yeah, I was glad.
But the point is, here's somebody that family obviously means a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Family did. And even though it was a sad occasion, my mother passing away, but the thing was, there were so many people there that shared blood with Joey, that were family to Joey, his family members. And so he wanted to capture that time. It was a sad time, but then, funerals are often reunions as well. And there they were all gathered like that in the living room. So I realize now when I look at my picture of them, he was right in front of me taking the same picture. There's so many of us that lost him. It's not just me. There are a lot of first cousins, uncles and aunts, people that loved him,
It just seems like his parents are devastated.
Yes, I'm sure they are. Because he really looked out for them. He took care of them. He moved them from the Bronx to Baltimore. He was, he was, his father really relied on him to get around, and he enjoyed traveling, with Joey. So,
well, you were saying your former husband was from Brooklyn, and Jonathan said to him once.
Yeah, at the funeral, when I introduced them, and I said Patrick's at my mother's funeral, yes. I introduced him to my husband and said he's from Brooklyn, and he was, at that time, he was adjusting his camera or whatever, and he said, well, he said something like, well, we're from the Bronx or whatever. He said, but, we're not there now. We're out of there now. And so I know that was a good thing he did. He did a very, wonderful thing for his parents. He moved them and his brother, and they were close to him. So he was always about his family. He had, in my opinion, he had a big heart. It was devastating when my cousin called me to tell me. It was just so hard to believe that he was gone and that he had, been murdered. It was just hard to believe that was real. It just didn't seem real. And even now, sometimes it just does not seem real, that he's not here.
If you could, you obviously would like the murder to be solved.
Yes, I would. I would. It was an awful thing. It was a vicious thing to take a father from his sons and, take a man from his wife and his family. And I really believe that what happened I think it's a very big situation, and I think he was caught up. I think he was a victim, and it's just very tragic, And to think that when he was at my house, he was speaking about this situation that he was in that was heavy, and it just got worse, and we didn't know what he was going through at that point in time. We just didn't know how much he was carrying. And I don't know if he could talk about it to anybody, you know. And at the funeral, of course, he never said anything. I didn't have a conversation with him at that point, but it was there then. And I mean, if you had seen him there at the funeral, you know, with the family, and we didn't get a chance to embrace him or say anything to him, and we just did not know that we would never get another chance to talk to him or anything, and that he would be taken away from us, and that he would be alone, you know, when he left this world. That's what really hurts my heart, to think that he was alone.